The sun hung low over the marina, casting a golden hue across the water. The gentle lapping of waves against the docks was a soothing symphony, one that usually put me at ease. But today something felt off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but the air was charged with an uneasy tension. I had just finished securing the Mariner, my beloved 24-foot cruiser, to the dock. I had double-knotted the lines, as I always did, and checked the mooring twice. She was my pride and joy, a vessel I had spent years perfecting, and I wasn't about to take any chances. I was about to head back to my car when I saw him, a dock worker sprinting toward me, his arms flailing like he was trying to land a plane in a hurricane. His face was beet red, his eyes wide with panic. Before I could even ask what was wrong, he shouted, "Your boat. It's gone." For a moment, my brain refused to process his words. Gone. That wasn't possible. I had just tied her up. She wasn't some flimsy rental. She was the Mariner, my sanctuary on the water. Then, the reality of the situation hit me like a rogue wave. This wasn't just any theft. This was her. I whipped around, scanning the water, and there she was, Jessica, a blonde whirlwind of chaos in a wide-brimmed sun hat, gripping the wheel of the Mariner like she owned it. Music blared from the speakers, and she was waving at confused boaters like she was some kind of maritime royalty. My stomach dropped. She had said she was just taking it for a quick ride. A quick ride? That was a phrase you used for borrowing someone's bike, not a damn boat. My pulse hammered in my skull as I fumbled for my phone. I barely registered my best friend, Mike, jogging up beside me, mid-sip from his iced coffee. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice casual, as if this were just another day at the marina. Then he followed my gaze and did a double take. "Wait, is that no way?" "Oh, it's her." I gritted my teeth. Jessica had been a thorn in my side for months, a walking, talking tornado of entitlement. She lived a few houses down and had made it abundantly clear that she believed boats should be shared among the community. Her reasoning? Not everyone can afford one, and that's just unfair. The last time I'd seen her, she had been passive-aggressively admiring the Mariner, sighing loudly about how she wished she had won, how unfair it was that some people just hoarded luxury items. I had laughed it off, never imagining she would actually have the audacity to steal it. But there she was, at the helm of my boat, tilting wildly, swerving between other vessels, and ignoring the angry shouts of actual sailors. Mike let out a low whistle. "Well, buddy, you're either going to need a lawyer or the Coast Guard." I was already dialing. Marina security was a joke, so I went straight to the real authorities. As I waited for the Coast Guard to pick up, I watched in horror as Jessica took a selfie with her phone in one hand and the steering wheel in the other. "Coast Guard, what's your emergency?" a calm voice answered. "Yes, hi, my boat's been stolen," I said, my voice tight. "Stolen? Do you have a description?" "Oh yeah," I replied, my eyes never leaving Jessica. "It's a 24-foot cruiser named the Mariner, currently being piloted by a lunatic in a sun hat who has no idea what she's doing." Mike choked on his coffee. "Did you just call her a lunatic to the Coast Guard?" The officer on the line paused, then asked in a perfectly neutral voice, "Do you know the individual?" "Unfortunately, yes," I said, my jaw clenched. I could hear keys clacking on the other end. "We're dispatching a patrol boat now." "Is she armed?" I watched as Jessica attempted some sort of twirl with the boat, nearly taking out a dock ladder. "Only with stupidity," I muttered. Mike was now recording the entire thing on his phone. "Dude, this is gold. We're going to be famous." I didn't care about fame. I cared about getting my boat back in one piece. Jessica, meanwhile, was having the time of her life. She was taking another selfie, captioning it who knows what, probably something like, "Living my best life." #yacht life. A fisherman in a tiny skiff had to throw himself overboard as she nearly mowed him down. I gritted my teeth so hard I thought they might crack. The Coast Guard officer came back on the line. "We have a visual on your vessel. Our team is moving in. Do you want to press charges?" "Yes," I said immediately. Mike raised an eyebrow at me. "You sure about that?" I turned to look at him, incredulous. "She stole my boat, Mike." He sipped his coffee, unfazed. "Yeah, but think about the memes. You could be a legend." Before I could respond, a burst of static crackled over the phone, and I could hear the Coast Guard radioing in. "We have the suspect in sight. She appears uncooperative." Uncooperative? I squinted. Jessica had just taken off her sun hat, and was now arguing with the Coast Guard, waving her phone in their faces like she was trying to prove she had permission to be on my boat. I shoved my phone at Mike and took off down the dock, trying to get a better look. My gut twisted as I saw her swerving yet again, nearly sideswiping another boat. Mike jogged after me. "You're not going to jump in, are you?" I wanted to, but I wasn't stupid. The Coast Guard had this. But that didn't mean I wasn't going to watch every second of Jessica's impending downfall. As I reached the edge of the dock, I could see the patrol boat closing in on her. A Coast Guard officer was shouting instructions through a bullhorn, but Jessica was ignoring them. Then, to my horror, she gunned the engine. "Oh, you idiot!" I shouted. The Mariner lurched forward, Jessica laughing like this was some kind of game. But Karma wasn't having it. With an ear-splitting crunch, the Mariner slammed into a buoy, jarring Jessica forward so hard she nearly face-planted onto the wheel. The Coast Guard wasted no time. Within seconds, officers were boarding my boat, securing the engine, and yanking Jessica away from the controls. She was screeching, flailing her arms like a toddler denied a toy. "I was going to bring it back," she wailed. The officers weren't amused. One of them grabbed her by the wrist as she kept babbling. "It's not stealing if I return it. It's a borrow." "A borrow?" Mike doubled over laughing. "Did she just say a borrow? Oh man, this is priceless." I wasn't laughing. I was too busy staring at my boat, my beautiful, damaged boat. The hull had a nasty dent from the collision, and I could already tell I'd be dealing with repairs. My stomach churned. One of the Coast Guard officers signaled to me. "Sir, are you the owner?" I nodded. "Do you want to press charges?" I looked over at Jessica. She was still protesting, insisting this was all a misunderstanding. Then she made the mistake of turning to me. "You wouldn't do that, would you?" she pleaded. Oh, she had some nerve. I crossed my arms. "You stole my boat. You almost killed a fisherman. You crashed into a buoy. And now I have to fix your mess." She scoffed. "Oh my God, it's just a boat ride. You're being so dramatic." That did it. I turned to the officer. "Throw the book at her." Jessica's jaw dropped. "What?" Mike clapped me on the back. "Oh, this is going to be good." As the Coast Guard hauled Jessica off my boat, I finally allowed myself to exhale. The nightmare wasn't over, but at least the worst was behind me. Or so I thought. Because when Jessica turned back to me, her eyes flashing with rage, I knew this wasn't the last I'd be hearing from her. And that was the real problem. The Coast Guard officers tightened their grip on Jessica, who was still flailing like a cat being dragged into a bathtub. She wasn't going quietly, that much was clear. Her sun hat had flown off in the chaos, and her perfectly styled blonde hair was now an absolute disaster, strands sticking out in every direction. She looked more like a shipwreck survivor than a boat thief, but somehow she still had the nerve to act like she was the victim here. This is ridiculous. You can't just arrest people for borrowing things. Jessica shrieked as the officers tried to get her onto their patrol boat. One of the officers, a tall, broad-shouldered man with mirrored sunglasses, barely flinched. "Ma'am, you are being detained for the unauthorized use of a marine vessel, reckless endangerment, and failure to comply with maritime regulations." Jessica let out a dramatic gasp, as if he had just accused her of high treason. Reckless endangerment? Oh, please. I was perfectly in control. I've driven jet skis before. This was no different. The officer raised an eyebrow. "You nearly capsized a fishing boat, collided with a buoy, and sped through a no-wake zone. That's reckless endangerment." Jessica crossed her arms and let out a scoff. "That's all just technicalities. No one got hurt." Then she turned to me and fixed me with a glare so intense that if looks could sink ships, the Mariner would have been at the bottom of the ocean. "You're really going to let them do this to me over a little joyride?" I stared at her, trying to comprehend the sheer audacity. "Jessica, you stole my boat. Oh my God, for the last time, I borrowed it. And I was going to bring it back. I don't see what the big deal is." I took a deep breath, forcing myself not to explode. "Jessica, borrowing requires permission. You didn't ask. You just took it." She rolled her eyes like I was some nitpicking bureaucrat denying her a minor convenience. "Well, duh. I knew you'd say no, so I didn't ask." Mike, who had been quietly recording the whole thing on his phone, let out a bark of laughter. "Oh, wow. That's an amazing legal defense. I knew you'd say no, so I took it anyway. Jessica, you should be a lawyer." Jessica whipped around to glare at him. "Shut up, Mike." Mike just smirked and took another sip of his coffee, unfazed. Touchy. Meanwhile, the Coast Guard officers had had enough. They finally managed to secure Jessica in handcuffs, which only made her more dramatic. She gasped like someone had just yanked a royal crown off her head. "Excuse me. This is unbelievable. Do you know who I am?" Officer Riley, the woman leading the team, adjusted her radio and answered without looking up. "No. And I don't care." Jessica's jaw dropped. "You can't just—" "We can," Officer Riley interrupted. "And we are." Jessica huffed and looked around for support. Her eyes landed on Tom, her husband, who had just arrived at the dock. His face was a mix of exhaustion and resignation, like a man who had been through this exact scenario one too many times. He rubbed his temples as he approached. "Jessica," he said, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 headaches. "What did you do?" "Oh, don't Jessica me," she snapped, yanking at the cuffs. "They're overreacting. I just took his boat for a little while. It's not like I stole a car." Tom turned to me, looking more apologetic than I had ever seen him. "I am so sorry," he said. "I don't even know what to say." I shrugged, still too angry to fully accept his apology. "Not much to say, man. Your wife stole my boat." Tom sighed. "Yeah, I figured." Mike, still recording, leaned toward me and whispered. He didn't even look surprised. I nodded. Probably not his first time dealing with this. Tom rubbed his face, then turned back to Jessica. "I told you not to do this." "I told you." Jessica scoffed. "Oh, come on, Tom. Are you really going to take his side over mine?" Tom hesitated, clearly debating the wisdom of his next words. Then he exhaled, looked at the Coast Guard officers, and said, "Yeah, Jessica. I am." Jessica's face twisted in betrayal. Tom threw his hands up. "Jessica, I don't know how to keep defending this kind of stuff. It's always something with you." Jessica turned back to me, her expression shifting into something that might have been genuine remorse if she weren't so infuriatingly self-centered. "Look, if it's really that big of a deal, I'll pay for any damages, okay? Just don't press charges." I shook my head. "Too late. The Coast Guard is handling this now. It's out of my hands." Jessica's eyes widened. "Wait, what?" The Coast Guard officer who had been speaking to me earlier stepped forward. "Ma'am, you're facing charges for unauthorized use of a marine vessel, reckless endangerment, and failure to comply with maritime regulations. You'll be taken to the station for processing." Jessica's face went through several shades of horror before she let out an incredulous laugh. "Oh my God, you were such a baby about this." I clenched my jaw. "Jessica, you put other people in danger. You don't just get to walk away from that." She opened her mouth to argue, but Tom cut in. "Jessica, just stop. You're not getting out of this." She turned back to him, her eyes pleading. "But Tom, honey." "No," Tom said firmly. "No more excuses." Jessica looked at him, then at the Coast Guard officers, then at me. She finally seemed to realize that there was no getting out of this one. Her shoulders slumped, and she muttered something under her breath that sounded suspiciously like, "This is so unfair." As the Coast Guard led her toward their boat, Mike let out a low whistle. Man, she really thought she could Jessica her way out of that. I shook my head, still trying to process the insanity of the last hour. "I'm just glad it's over." But Mike, ever the troublemaker, just grinned. "Oh, buddy, it's not over." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Mike held up his phone, showing me the screen. "Dude, I posted the video of her screaming about a borrow 15 minutes ago." I blinked, and Mike wiggled his eyebrows. "It already has 20,000 views." A slow, almost wicked grin spread across my face as I realized what that meant. Jessica had made her bed, and now she was about to be famous for it. And something told me that was going to drive her even crazier than the Coast Guard ever could. By the time the Coast Guard hauled Jessica onto their patrol boat, a small crowd had gathered at the dock. Most of them were fellow boaters who had heard the commotion and wanted to see what was going on. Some people were whispering, others were openly laughing, and a few were already scrolling through their phones, probably watching the now viral video Mike had uploaded. Jessica sat on the patrol boat's bench, arms crossed, her face scrunched up like a child who had been told they couldn't have dessert. She still hadn't fully accepted that she was actually in trouble. Every few seconds, she'd huff and mutter something to the officers, as if she was expecting them to suddenly realize this was all a huge misunderstanding and let her go. Meanwhile, Tom stood at the dock, rubbing his face like a man who had aged 10 years in an hour. He finally looked up at me and let out a deep sigh. I swear, I don't know what to do with her. I wanted to feel bad for him, but I couldn't bring myself to. Might be time to start with actions have consequences. Tom gave a humorless chuckle. Oh, I've tried. Believe me. Mike, still grinning like a kid on Christmas morning, stepped up beside me. So, what do you think her Yelp review of the Coast Guard is going to look like? I snorted. 1 star. Did not let me keep stolen boat. Rude. Tom groaned. That's not even a joke. She actually leaves reviews like that. I stared at him. You're kidding. Wish I was, Tom muttered. One of the Coast Guard officers, the same one who had been unbothered by Jessica's meltdown earlier, approached me. Sir, we're going to need you to fill out some paperwork regarding the incident. And if you'd like to press additional charges beyond what we've already cited her for, now's the time. Jessica perked up at that, whipping her head toward me. Oh, come on. You don't have to do that. You've made your point. I crossed my arms. Have I? Because you still don't seem to think you did anything wrong. Jessica scoffed. I've already said I'll pay for the damages. What more do you want? Mike spoke up before I could. An ounce of self-awareness. Jessica shot him a glare so fierce it could have melted steel. I turned back to the officer. What happens if I don't press any additional charges? She'll still face fines, a temporary boating ban, and mandatory community service, the officer replied. But if you'd like to pursue additional legal action, that's your choice. I glanced at Jessica, who was now glaring at Tom as if this was somehow his fault. I wasn't the type to hold a grudge, but this wasn't a simple case of a neighbor borrowing something without asking. She had put people in danger, damaged my boat, and had the gall to act like she was the victim. Still, I wasn't about to drag this out for months in court. I shook my head. I think the public humiliation is punishment enough. Jessica looked almost relieved until Mike added, plus, she's never going to live this down. This video is everywhere. Jessica's eyes snapped to him. Wait, what? Mike grinned and held up his phone. Oh, yeah. The internet loves you, Jessica. Jessica lunged forward as if she could somehow stop it, only to be yanked back by the officer. Take that down. That's illegal. Mike raised an eyebrow. No, it's not. You were in public, and I filmed an actual crime happening. That's fair game. Jessica turned to Tom, pure desperation in her eyes. Tom, do something. Tom, to his credit, actually seemed to think about it for half a second. Then he shrugged. You did this to yourself, Jessica. Jessica let out an inhuman noise somewhere between a shriek and a groan. The officer, clearly done with this whole ordeal, signaled for his team to wrap things up. All right, let's get moving. We'll be in touch regarding your boat repairs, sir. I nodded, watching as they pulled away from the dock with Jessica still muttering to herself about the injustice of it all. As soon as they were out of earshot, Mike burst out laughing. Oh my God, that was art. Tom let out another sigh, rubbing his temples. I need a drink. Mike patted him on the back. Man, you deserve one. The next few days were a blur of insurance calls, repair estimates, and way too many notifications from people sending me clips of the video. It had exploded overnight, racking up millions of views. People couldn't get enough of Jessica's rant about a borrow, and someone had even remixed it into a song. I wasn't sure what was funnier, the fact that she had become a meme or the fact that she had no idea yet. That changed when I saw her at the marina a week later. She had shown up for her first day of community service, wearing oversized sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low over her face. It didn't help. Everyone still recognized her. I was sitting on a bench near the dock when she spotted me. Her expression went from embarrassed to furious in record time. She stomped over, her cleaning supplies rattling in the bucket she was carrying. This is your fault, she hissed. I raised an eyebrow. My fault. You stole my boat. Jessica scoffed. I wouldn't even be here if it weren't for that stupid video. Mike, who was standing next to me, grinned. Oh, you saw it? Jessica clenched her jaw. It's everywhere. People at the grocery store point at me. Mike nodded, looking far too pleased. Yeah, that makes sense. It's got, 15 million views now. Jessica groaned. I hate the internet. I leaned back, enjoying the moment. Maybe next time, don't steal a boat. Jessica glared at me, then looked around the marina, clearly searching for someone to back her up. No one did. In fact, Most people avoided eye contact entirely, probably hoping they wouldn't get dragged into whatever meltdown she was about to have. With a frustrated sigh, she stomped off toward the dockside bathrooms, where her assigned cleaning duties awaited. Mike shook his head, watching her go. Man, you think she learned anything? I smirked. Not a chance. Mike grinned. Still, best day ever. I couldn't help but agree. My boat would get repaired. Jessica was finally facing consequences, and thanks to the internet, she'd be a cautionary tale for entitled boat thieves everywhere. Sometimes, karma worked fast. In the weeks that followed, the video of Jessica's borrow incident continued to circulate, becoming one of the most shared memes of the year. It even spawned a series of parody videos, with people reenacting her infamous rant in increasingly absurd scenarios. Jessica, for her part, tried to lay low, but the internet never forgets. As for me, I got the Mariner repaired, though the dent in the hull served as a permanent reminder of that chaotic day. Mike and I still laugh about it whenever we're out on the water, and I've made it a point to double-check my mooring lines every time I dock. Jessica eventually completed her community service, but her reputation never fully recovered. She became a local legend, though not the kind she had hoped for. Every now and then, I'll see her at the marina, and she'll shoot me a glare that could curdle milk. But she never says a word, and that's fine by me. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply living well and knowing that karma is always watching. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story on Store of Good Stories. If this story touched your heart or made you think, don't forget to hit like and share the video to spread this positive message to more people. And if this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the meaningful stories we share every week. Your support is the biggest motivation for Store of Good Stories to keep bringing heartfelt and valuable stories to you. See you in the next video.